A family adopts a new dog, but when the vet sees it, he immediately calls 911. At first, it feels like a heartwarming rescue, an ordinary family giving a scarred animal a second chance. But the moment that microchip is scanned, everything changes. This isn't just any stray. This dog carries a hidden past so dangerous, it could tear lives apart. Suddenly, what began as a simple act of kindness spirals into a battle against secrets, corruption, and the fight for survival. Why did this dog end up in their home? And what terrifying truth will be unleashed when the past finally comes to light? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more thunder cracked across the darkened sky as Maeve Calder steered her old pickup truck along the rain-slicked road outside Red Bluff. The windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically, fighting against the heavy downpour. In the passenger seat, her 14-year-old daughter Emma pressed her face against the window, while 16-year-old Tyler slouched in the back, his phone temporarily forgotten as lightning illuminated the stormy landscape. "Mom, slow down!" Emma suddenly called out, sitting up straight. "I think I saw something." Maeve eased off the accelerator, peering through the sheets of rain. There, huddled against the chain-link fence of the old Jameson stockyard, was a large shape. As lightning flashed again, they caught a glimpse of matted fur and the gleam of watchful eyes. "It's a dog," Tyler said, leaning forward between the seats. "Pull over, Mom." Maeve's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The last thing they needed was another mouth to feed, but she couldn't leave an animal out in this weather. With a sigh, she carefully pulled onto the muddy shoulder. "Stay in the car until I check it's safe," she instructed, grabbing the flashlight from under her seat. The rain drummed against her jacket as she approached. The fence, beam of light cutting through the darkness. The dog didn't move, but Maeve could see it trembling. It was a large shepherd mix, its coat a muddy blend of brown and black. As she drew closer, her heart clenched at the sight of its condition. Scars crisscrossed its muzzle, and both ears were torn and ragged, speaking of a harsh past. "Hey there, buddy," she called softly, crouching down several feet away. The dog's eyes met hers, not with aggression, but with a weary wariness that made her throat tight. "It's okay. We want to help." Despite her warning, she heard car doors open behind her as Emma and Tyler joined her in the rain. "Oh, the poor thing," Emma exclaimed, already shrugging off her jacket. The dog's gaze shifted between them, but it remained still, as if waiting for commands. There was something unsettling about its quiet obedience, so different from the usual wariness of strays. Tyler approached slowly, holding out his hand. "He's not even growling, Mom. I think he's trained." The dog's nose twitched, and after a moment, it took a tentative step forward. Emma draped her jacket over its back, and to their surprise, the dog accepted the touch without flinching. "We can't leave him here," Emma pleaded, though Maeve had already known they wouldn't. The shutdown stockyard was no place for any living creature, especially on a night like this. "Tyler, get the old blanket from behind the seat," Maeve directed. "Emma, help me get him into the truck." The dog followed them without resistance, accepting their guidance as if it was used to taking orders. Once in the truck, it sat perfectly still in the back with Tyler, water dripping from its coat. As Maeve drove home, her mind raced. The dog's behavior and scars told a story she wasn't sure she wanted to know. But looking in the rearview mirror, seeing how gently her children were already treating it, she knew they'd made the right choice. At home, they settled the dog in the mudroom. Emma brought towels while Tyler raided the pantry for food. The dog accepted their care with the same quiet compliance that continued to trouble Maeve. Under the bright lights, its injuries were even more apparent. Besides the old scars, there were fresher cuts on its legs, and its ribs showed through its coat. Yet there was an intelligence in its eyes that suggested this was no ordinary stray. "He needs a name," Emma declared, carefully drying the dog's fur. "How about Yarrow?" Tyler suggested, setting down a bowl of leftover stew. "You know, like the healing plant in your garden, Mom?" Maeve smiled despite her concerns. "Yarrow it is, at least until we can get him to the vet tomorrow and check for a microchip." The newly named Yarrow turned his head at the sound of his new name, and for the first time, his tail gave a slight wag. It was a small gesture, but it brought tears to Emma's eyes. "See? He likes it." That night, after the kids went to bed, Maeve sat at her kitchen table, a cup of cooling tea before her. Through the open door, she could see Yarrow lying on the blankets they'd provided, his eyes still open and alert despite his exhaustion. "What happened to you?" she whispered, more to herself than the dog. Yarrow's ears twitched, and he lifted his head to look at her. In that moment, something passed between them, a recognition of shared pain, perhaps. Like her, this dog carried invisible wounds beneath the visible ones. Morning brought clearer skies and a decision. After calling the local vet and describing Yarrow's condition, Maeve managed to get an emergency appointment. The dog climbed into the truck without hesitation, sitting calmly in the back seat while Emma fussed over him. At the clinic, Dr. Sarah Martinez's expression grew grave as she examined Yarrow. "These aren't typical stray dog injuries," she said quietly, running her hands gently over the scars. "Some of these marks, they're deliberate." Maeve's suspicions were confirmed, but her children's attachment to Yarrow had already grown strong. When the scan showed no microchip, and no matching dogs appeared in the lost pet database, the decision was already made in their hearts. "We'll need to report this to animal control, Dr. Martinez advised, but if you're willing to give him a home, I think that would be best for him. He seems to trust you already, which is remarkable given what he's been through." The paperwork was filled out, vaccines were updated, and Yarrow officially became a Calder. As they drove home, Maeve caught sight of him in the rearview mirror, his head resting on Emma's lap while Tyler scratched behind his torn ears. For the first time, the dog's eyes were closed, his posture relaxed. "Welcome to the family, Yarrow," she murmured, and meant it, despite the nagging feeling that this dog's presence in their lives would lead to something more than just adding a pet to their household. Back home, Yarrow explored their small ranch with growing confidence. He stayed close to the children as they showed him around, his protective instincts already evident in the way he positioned himself between them and any unexpected sounds. That evening, as Maeve watched Yarrow settle into his new bed, upgraded from the mudroom to the living room at Emma's insistence, she realized that sometimes the best decisions were the ones your heart made before your head could object. Whatever Yarrow's past held, his future would be with them, and somehow, that felt right. The morning sun had barely cleared the mountains when Maeve pulled into Dr. Coulter Reeves's veterinary clinic. The gravel crunched under her tires as she parked beside the weathered building that had served Red Bluff's animals for over 20 years. Yarrow sat calmly in the back seat, his eyes alert but showing none of the anxiety most dogs displayed before a vet visit. "Good morning, Mrs. Calder." Dr. Reeves greeted them as they entered, his rolled-up sleeves and the mud on his boots suggesting he'd already handled a few early morning farm calls. His kind eyes crinkled at the corners as he studied Yarrow. "And who do we have here?" "We found him last night," Maeve explained, watching as Yarrow followed her to the examination room without any prompting, "by the old stockyard." Dr. Reeves's gentle hands moved expertly over Yarrow's body, examining the old scars that mapped the dog's history. "He's been through something," he murmured, his voice carrying a note of concern. "Let's check for a microchip." The scanner made a soft beeping sound as it passed over Yarrow's shoulder. Dr. Reeves frowned at the display, his expression shifting from professional interest to obvious concern. "That's odd," he said, reading the screen again. "What is it?" Maeve asked, stepping closer. The chip number triggered some kind of alert. "YY5. He trailed off, reaching for the clinic's phone. "I need to call this in." Maeve watched as he dialed 911, her heart beginning to race. Yarrow remained perfectly still on the examination table, but his ears had perked forward, his body tensing slightly. "Yes, this is Dr. Coulter Reeves at Red Bluff Veterinary Clinic, Castrodaya." He spoke into the phone, his voice steady but urgent. "I've scanned a microchip that's triggered a federal alert. The number begins with YY5. The front door burst open with a bang that echoed through the small clinic. Two men in dark feedlot jackets pushed their way in, their boots heavy on the linoleum floor. Maeve caught a glimpse of their faces, hard eyes, and set jaws that spoke of dangerous intent. "Dr. Reeves reacted instantly, still holding the phone as he slammed and locked the examination room door. "We have intruders," he said clearly into the receiver. "Send help immediately." The men pounded on the door. "Give us the dog," one of them shouted. "This doesn't have to get complicated." Maeve's heart hammered in her chest, but anger pushed through her fear. She moved to stand between the door and Jane. Yarrow, who had dropped into a low crouch, his eyes fixed on the door and a low growl building in his throat. "He's not going anywhere with you," she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "Lady, you don't know what you're dealing with," the second man warned. "That dog is property of—" The distant wail of sirens cut through his words. The pounding on the door stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of running feet and a car engine roaring to life. "Doctor." Reeves moved to the window, watching as a dark pickup truck peeled out of the parking lot, gravel spraying in its wake. "They're gone," he said, his voice tight. "But they'll be back." Maeve's legs felt weak as the adrenaline began to fade. She reached out to steady herself against the examination table, and felt Yarrow press against her leg, offering silent support. "Doctor." Reeves pulled up a chair for her, his face etched with concern. "The police will be here any minute," he said, his hand warm and reassuring on her shoulder. "Whatever this is, Mrs. Calder, you're not in it alone." The morning sun streamed through the window, catching the silver strands in Yarrow's fur. He stayed pressed against Maeve's leg, his presence both a comfort and now, she realized, a source of danger. But as she looked down at him, saw the trust and determination in his eyes, she knew she couldn't abandon him to whatever dark past those men represented. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights reflecting off the clinic's windows. Yarrow's ears twitched at the sound, but he remained steady, watching the door with the same quiet vigilance he'd shown since the moment they'd found him. The wailing sirens drew closer until red and blue lights flooded the clinic's small waiting room. Through the window, Maeve watched as several patrol cars pulled into the gravel parking lot, their tires crunching to a stop. Deputy Leon Haynes emerged from the lead vehicle, his uniform pressed to perfection despite the early hour. "Keep Yarrow calm, Doctor," Reeves murmured, moving to unlock the examination room door. The shepherd pressed closer to Maeve's leg, his body tense but steady. Deputy Haynes strode in, his polished boots clicking against the linoleum. His eyes darted around the room, taking everything in with calculated precision. "Morning, folks. Quite a situation we've got here." "Those men tried to take my dog," Maeve said, her hand resting protectively on Yarrow's head. "About that." Haynes pulled a thick manila envelope from under his arm. "That animal is actually evidence in an ongoing federal investigation. I'll need to take custody immediately." "Doctor." Reeves stepped forward, his normally gentle expression hardening. "Deputy. I've yet to receive confirmation from the emergency dispatcher about proper protocol in this situation." "Standard procedure." Haynes extracted a stack of official-looking papers from the envelope, laying them on the counter with practiced smoothness. "Any flagged evidence must be secured by local law enforcement, pending federal pickup." Maeve studied the documents, her stomach knotting. Everything looked proper, too proper, like it had been prepared in advance. She glanced at Yarrow, who had begun trembling against her leg. His eyes were fixed on the deputy, and she could feel his muscles coiling with tension. "He's frightened," she said firmly. "I don't think, ma'am." Haynes cut her off, his voice carrying an edge beneath its professional veneer. "This isn't a matter for discussion. That dog is now in police custody." Dr. Reeves moved closer to Maeve, his voice dropping low enough that only she could hear. Y5 is a witness designation. Federal cases use it to track animals linked to major investigations, usually fighting rings or trafficking operations. Something's not right here. Maeve's protective instincts flared. The slick paperwork, Yarrow's reaction, the convenient timing, gain. This wasn't about following procedure. This was about power, about silencing a witness, before he could reveal too much. "I want to speak with the federal agents directly," she said, meeting Haynes's calculating gaze. The deputy's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's not possible at this time. Now, hand over the animal, or I'll have to charge you with interfering in a police investigation." "Doctor." Reeves stepped forward again. "At least allow me to sedate him for transport. He's clearly distressed." "No time," Haynes snapped, his careful facade cracking slightly. He pulled a heavy-duty leash from his belt and approached Yarrow. The shepherd's trembling increased, but he didn't growl or snap. Instead, he seemed to shrink in on himself, as if expecting punishment for any resistance. The sight broke Maeve's heart and strengthened her resolve. Something was terribly wrong here. But with the deputy's hand hovering near his weapon and other officers waiting outside, she had no choice. Haynes clipped the leash to Yarrow's collar, and the dog went rigid, his eyes dulling as if shutting down completely. "I'll need your contact information," Haynes said, already leading Yarrow toward the door. "For the paperwork." Maeve provided it mechanically, her throat tight as she watched Yarrow being led away. The shepherd glanced back once, and in his eyes, she saw something that cut straight to her core, not just fear, but betrayal. She had promised to protect him, and now she was letting him be taken. As the deputy's car pulled away, Dr. Reeves placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "That paperwork may look official, but something doesn't add up. Why would a local deputy have federal documents ready to go at a moment's notice?" Maeve nodded, her mind already racing ahead. She had lost her husband to a suspicious fire. She wouldn't lose Yarrow to whatever shadowy operation was trying to silence him. This wasn't about procedure or protocol, it was about power and corruption, and she was done being powerless. "What do we do now?" she asked, watching the patrol cars disappear down the road. Dr. Reeves's expression was grim but determined. "We start asking questions, and we don't stop until we get answers." The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty examination room, and Maeve could still feel the ghost of Yarrow's trembling body pressed against her leg. Whatever was happening in Red Bluff, whatever secrets that shepherd carried, she was now part of it, and she would not back down. After Deputy Haynes's departure, Dr. Reeves locked the clinic's front door and pulled the blinds. His usual calm demeanor had given way to visible tension as he gestured for Maeve to follow him to his private office. "There's something you need to know," he said, closing the office door behind them. "And I warn you, it's not going to be easy to hear." Maeve sank into one of the leather chairs, her hands still shaking from Yarrow's forced removal. "Tell me." Reeves leaned against his desk, choosing his words carefully. "You've heard of Calvin Drummond." Of course. Everyone in Red Bluff knew Calvin Drummond. His feedlot operations employed half the county, and his name graced everything from the high school football stadium to the new wing of the hospital. The respectable public face of Calvin Drummond isn't the whole story. Reeves continued. For the past year, federal investigators have been building a case against him. They suspect he's been running illegal dogfighting rings through his abandoned stockyards. But that's not all. They believe he's also behind a string of suspicious fires, mostly on properties he later acquired at bargain prices. The words hit Maeve like physical blows. Her throat went dry as memories flooded back. The night of the fire that killed Tom, her husband. The way the insurance investigators had seemed oddly rushed in, ruling it an accident. And how, just weeks later, Drummond's company had offered to buy their struggling ranch for a fraction of its value. "Tom's fire," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The barn fire that killed my husband, are you saying?" Reeves nodded grimly. The timing and location fit the pattern. Your land borders Drummond's main feedlot operation. He'd tried to buy you out before, hadn't he? Maeve pressed her hands to her temples, grief colliding with a horrible new understanding. 3 times. Tom always refused. He said his grandfather had built that ranch with his bare hands, that no amount of money could make him sell. And then the fire happened, Reeves said softly. It was so fast, Maeve remembered, her voice hollow. Tom went in to save the horses. The fire department said the speed of the blaze was unusual, but they blamed it on old hay and faulty wiring. I never questioned. Her voice broke. Reeves pulled up a chair beside her. Yarrow's microchip designation, YY5. It's a federal code used to track animals that serve as living evidence. Given his injuries and his reaction to those men, I'd bet anything he escaped from one of Drummond's fighting operations. That's why they're so desperate to get him back. And Deputy Haynes? Maeve asked, though she already suspected the answer. Drummond has half the local authorities in his pocket. Campaign contributions, favors, threats, whatever works. That's why the feds have been building their case quietly. But if Yarrow could lead them to one of the fighting locations, if he could help them prove the connection. Maeve stood abruptly, anger replacing shock. So my husband's death wasn't an accident. It was business. Just another acquisition strategy for Calvin Drummond. Maeve, Reeves said carefully. We don't have proof yet. But Yarrow might be the key to exposing everything, the fights, the fires, all of it. That's why they moved so fast to take him. She paced the small office, 18 years of grief transforming into purpose. I let them take him. That dog came to us for help, and I let them take him. You didn't have a choice, Reeves reminded her. But this isn't over, not by a long shot. Maeve stopped pacing, her face set with determination. No, it's not. I need to know the truth. That. About Tom's death, about Drummond, about all of it, and I need to help Yarrow. He's as much a victim in this as anyone. It could be dangerous, Reeves warned. Drummond didn't build his empire by being gentle with opposition. I've spent 18 years thinking I lost my husband to an accident, Maeve replied. Her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. My children lost their father. If there's even a chance that Drummond was responsible, I have to know. And I have to make sure he can't hurt anyone else, human or animal. Reeves studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll help however I can. I've seen too many injured animals come through here with stories they can't tell. Maybe it's time someone finally listened to them. The morning sun had risen fully now, streaming through the office blinds in dusty bars of light. In that illumination, Maeve could see her path forward clearly for the first time since Tom's death. She would find answers, that for herself, for her children, and for a scarred shepherd who had stumbled into their lives, carrying keys to a deadly truth. Where do we start? She asked. I know someone who might be able to help, Reeves said, pulling out his phone. An old-timer named Gus Perdue. He worked the power lines in this county for 30 years. Knows every back road and hidden spot where Drummond might be operating. Within an hour, they sat at Gus's kitchen table, the morning sun casting long shadows through dusty windows. Gus Perdue's weathered face creased with concern as he listened, his work-worn hands, missing 2 fingers from an old accident, wrapped around a coffee mug. Drummond's got properties scattered all over, Gus confirmed, his voice gravelly from years of working outdoors, places that don't show up on regular maps. I've seen trucks, heading to those locations at odd hours, heard things I wish I hadn't. Maeve leaned forward. Would you help us find them? For Tom's widow? You bet I would. Gus's eyes hardened. Never did sit right with me, that fire. Happened too fast, burned too hot. We need one more person, Reeves interjected. Someone who understands working dogs. I know just the man, Rowdy Pennington. Former search and rescue handler. They found Rowdy at his small training facility outside town. His broad shoulders and weather-creased face spoke of years spent outdoors, and his eyes lit up with interest when Yarrow was mentioned. A shepherd mix with federal coding? Rowdy asked, running a hand through his shaggy blonde hair. Bring him here. I need to see him work. It took some doing, but they managed to get Yarrow released back to Maeve's custody temporarily, citing animal welfare concerns. When they brought him to Rowdy's facility, the change in the dog was immediate. His posture straightened, ears alert, waiting for commands. Rowdy watched Yarrow intently. This dog's had specialized training. High-level stuff. He pulled out several small cans from a cabinet. Let's see what he can do. They set up a simple test area, and Rowdy arranged the cans in a line. Each one contains a different substance. If I'm right about his training. Yarrow moved down the line with purpose, stopping at one particular can. His body went rigid, tail straight out behind him, a perfect alert pose. Well, I'll be damned, Rowdy breathed. That's accelerant detection behavior. This dog was trained to find fire-starting materials. Like the kind used in arson? Maeve's heart pounded. Exactly like that. Rowdy's face was grim. Which means someone was using him to either investigate fires or... He trailed off. Or to make sure the accelerants were placed correctly before a fire was set, Reeves finished quietly. Maeve's hands trembled as she reached for her old barn jacket, hung by Rowdy's door. I was wearing this the night of the fire. The night Tom died. I haven't been able to bring myself to wash it since. She laid the jacket on the ground. Yarrow needed no command. He moved to it immediately, sniffing methodically. Then he froze, giving the same alert signal he'd shown with the can. "Good boy," Rowdy said softly, but his face was troubled. "He's picking up traces of accelerant. After all these years, there's still enough residue for him to detect it." Maeve sank to her knees beside Yarrow, burying her face in his fur. The dog turned to her, offering silent comfort as tears fell. "This is proof," Gus said, his voice rough with emotion. "Proof that Tom's death wasn't no accident. Proof that won't stand up in court, not yet," Reeves cautioned. "But it's a start. Yarrow isn't just a witness to current crimes. He's carrying evidence of past ones too." Rowdy knelt beside Maeve and Yarrow. "This dog's been through hell. Fighting rings, based on his scars. But that was just cover for something bigger. They trained him for serious work, professional-grade detection. Then, something went wrong, and he escaped. And found us," Maeve whispered, stroking Yarrow's scarred muzzle. "He found us because he knew. Somehow he knew we needed him as much as he needed us." The group stood in silence for a moment, watching Maeve with the dog who carried proof of her husband's murder. Finally, Gus spoke up. "So what's our next move?" "We need to document everything," Reeves said. "Every alert Yarrow gives us, every location he identifies. Build a case that even Drummond's money can't bury. And we need to keep you both safe," Rowdy added, looking at Maeve and Yarrow. "If Drummond realizes what this dog can prove." "I'm not afraid," Maeve said, standing up. Her grief had hardened into resolve. "Tom died because he stood up to Drummond. The least I can do is finish what he started." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maeve's kitchen as she stared at the boardie. Photo from the vet clinic, taken just days ago. Something caught her eye, her reflection in the window behind where Yarrow had stood. She squinted, holding the picture closer. There, in the glass, she could make out the side of a truck. Cedar Creek Transport was painted on its door, partially visible but clear enough. Her hands shook as she dialed Reeves. "I think I know how they moved him. There's a livestock hauler that works exclusively for Drummond's operations." "Cedar Creek?" Reeves asked. "They run a regular route out past the old Thompson place. Gus mentioned seeing their trucks there at odd hours. Within an hour, they gathered at Rowdy's facility to plan. But the news waiting for them was worse than expected." "Haynes handed Yarrow over to Drummond's men this morning," Rowdy reported grimly. "Said it was standard procedure for evidence animals." Maeve's heart clenched. "We have to find him. That transport route, it has to lead somewhere." Gus spread out a map on Rowdy's work table. His weathered finger traced a line along back roads. "They always turn off here, behind the ridge where the old mining roads start. Nobody goes out there anymore except their trucks." They took two vehicles, Reeves's truck and Rowdy's SUV, following the transport route as the sun sank lower. Past the ridge, fresh tire tracks led them to a cluster of seemingly abandoned buildings. "Park here," Gus whispered. "They've got cameras further in." They crept closer on foot. The first building looked like a standard storage facility, but the heavy locks and reinforced doors told a different story. Through a gap in the metal siding, they could hear dogs, dozens of them. "A kennel," Rowdy breathed. "Professional setup, from the sound of it." Moving carefully around the perimeter, they found something worse. Behind the main building, partially underground, concrete walls formed a circular pit. Bloodstains marked the floor. "Dear God," Maeve whispered. The reality of what Yarrow had endured hit her full force. A sharp bark caught their attention, familiar, urgent. Yarrow's voice. They followed the sound to a smaller building, its walls still bearing scorch marks from a recent fire. "Watch the perimeter," Reeves warned as they approached. But Yarrow's barking grew more insistent. Inside, the acrid smell of diesel was overwhelming. Maeve's eyes were drawn to a wall stud near the door, its wood darker than the rest. Rowdy ran his fingers along it. "Soaked in fuel," he confirmed. "Recently too." Yarrow burst through an interior door, charging straight to a metal box in the corner. The container was charred but intact, and when Maeve opened it, she found stacks of ledgers inside. Some pages were singed, but most remained readable. "These aren't just fight records," Reeves said, flipping through them. There are property listings, insurance claims, payment schedules. His voice trailed off as understanding dawned. It's all connected, Maeve realized. The fights were just cover for something bigger. They'd buy properties cheap, insure them high, then burn them for the payouts. That's what Tom discovered. Yarrow pressed against her leg, whining softly. In the dim light, his scars seemed to tell a deeper story, not just of fights, but of a systematic operation that used cruelty to mask greed. This is organized crime, Reeves said quietly. Dogs trained to detect accelerants, used to ensure the fires would burn right. Properties acquired through intimidation. Insurance fraud on a massive scale. And murder, Maeve added, thinking of Tom. When someone got too close to the truth. A distant engine sound made them freeze. Headlights swept across the building's exterior. Time to go, Gus urged. We've seen enough. They slipped out the back, Yarrow leading them through shadow to safety. As they drove away, Maeve held the rescued dog close, feeling his heart beat against hers. What do we do now? She asked once they were safely away. Now we have proof, Reeves said firmly, not just of the dog fights, but of systematic arson and fraud. Those ledgers connect everything, and everyone involved. Maeve looked down at Yarrow, who had risked everything to show them the truth. We'll make it right, she promised him softly. For everyone they've hurt. The night wrapped around them as they drove back to town, each lost in thought about the scale of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't just about one tragic fire or one escaped dog. It was about a web of corruption that had ensnared their entire community, hidden behind a veil of respectability and fear. The moonlight filtered through the broken windows of the charred building, casting eerie shadows across the exposed beams. Maeve's flashlight beam caught something glinting beneath a loose floorboard, something small and metallic that shouldn't have been there. Her hands trembled as she knelt down. The plank lifted easily, warped from old heat damage. There, nestled in years of dust and debris, lay a single brass gear no bigger than a dime. Her breath caught in her throat. Tom's watch, she whispered, carefully lifting the tiny component. Her husband had always carried his grandfather's pocket watch, keeping it meticulously maintained. She'd recognize its parts anywhere. She'd watched him clean and oil it countless times at their kitchen table. Reeves crouched beside her, shining his light on the surrounding area. The beam highlighted dark staining on the wood beneath. Not the random pattern of a natural spill, but deliberate lines where accelerant had been poured. They staged it all, Maeve said, her voice hollow. Tom wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They killed him. They killed him because he found out what they were doing. The reality she'd been fighting finally crystallized, sharp and clear as broken glass. Her fingers closed around the gear until its edges bit into her palm. Memories flooded back, Tom's increasing anxiety in the weeks before his death, the late-night phone calls he wouldn't discuss, the way he'd started keeping detailed notes in a locked drawer. He must have followed them here. She continued, piecing it together. Just like we did. He found evidence of the fights, the arsons, and they caught him. Reeves placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Maeve, I told myself it was an accident. Her voice cracked. I told our children it was an accident. All this time, I've been living with a lie they created. The grief she'd carefully contained for months burst its banks. But something else rose with it, a steely determination that straightened her spine and dried her tears. This wasn't just about protecting Yarrow anymore. This wasn't even about survival. This was about justice, set into Vi. For Tom, for their children, for every person Drummond had hurt while hiding behind his respectable facade. We have proof now, Reeves said quietly. The ledgers, the accelerant traces, this physical evidence linking Tom to this location. It's enough to bring in federal investigators. But Drummond has connections, Maeve countered. He's had years to build his influence. What if he manages to bury this too? Then we don't give him the chance. Reeves's voice carried the same quiet strength that had steadied her through every revelation. We gather everything, the ledgers, photographs, samples from this site. We document every detail, create copies, get it all to multiple authorities at once. Make it too big to hide. Maeve looked down at the gear in her palm, remembering Tom's patient hands working with similar pieces at their kitchen table. He'd always said that justice was like his beloved timepiece. All the components had to work together perfectly, or nothing worked at all. "We'll need help," she said. "Gus knows every back road in the county. He can help us track their movements. Rowdy understands their operation from the inside. And Yarrow." She glanced at the shepherd, who sat alert beside them. "Yarrow can prove the connection between the fights and the arsons." "It's dangerous," Reeves warned. "Once we start moving against them, they'll know." "They killed my husband," Maeve said firmly. "They've been killing hope in this community for years, making everyone too afraid to stand up to them. That ends now." She stood, tucking the gear carefully into her pocket. Its weight felt like a promise, to Tom, to their children, to herself. The time for fear was over. "We'll need to move fast," Reeves said, already planning. "Document everything tonight, while the scene is undisturbed. Then start reaching out to trusted contacts, federal agents, state investigators, journalists. Create too many eyes on this for Drummond to shut them all." Maeve nodded, her mind racing ahead to the tasks before them. "We'll need to protect the children. And Yarrow." "My sister has a place up north," Reeves offered. "Remote, secure. They'll be safe there while we do this." The magnitude of what they were undertaking should have been overwhelming. Instead, Maeve felt a strange calm settle over her. The path ahead was clear now, illuminated by the truth she'd finally allowed herself to see. "Tom died trying to expose this," she said quietly. "We're going to finish what he started." Reeves's hand found hers in the darkness, warm and steady. Together, they began documenting the scene, photographing evidence, collecting samples, copying every page of the damaged ledgers. Each piece was another link in the chain they would use to bind Drummond's empire. The brass gear rode in Maeve's pocket, a constant reminder of why they couldn't fail. This wasn't just about one woman's grief, or one dog's rescue anymore. This was about bringing light to shadows that had darkened their community for far too long. As they worked through the night, Maeve felt Tom's presence in every careful note they made, every photograph they took. She wouldn't let his death be meaningless. Justice would come, as precise and inevitable as the turning of gears in a well-made watch. The donation crate sat innocently by the community center's back door, its weathered wood bearing a fresh coat of white paint. To casual observers, it looked like any other collection box for Drummond's annual charity drive. But inside its hollow walls, carefully positioned cameras and a GPS tracker waited silently. "Everything's transmitting clearly," Reeves confirmed, checking the feed on his tablet from their position in the parking lot. The night air carried a sharp autumn chill, making Maeve pull her jacket tighter around her shoulders. "How long do you think before they take the bait?" she whispered, watching the dark building. Their research had revealed a pattern. Drummond's men always collected the donation crates after midnight, long after the center had closed. "Won't be long now." Reeves adjusted the tablet's brightness. "His operation runs like clockwork. They'll want to sort through donations before dawn." Right on cue, a white van with faded lettering pulled into the lot, its headlights off. Two men emerged, moving with practiced efficiency. They lifted the crate and slid it into the van's cargo area. "Got them," Reeves murmured, watching the GPS signal activate. The van pulled away, following the exact route their intelligence had predicted, straight toward Drummond's sprawling ranch property. They waited 15 minutes before following, keeping well back. Gus had mapped out the ranch's camera blind spots during his line work, marking the safest approach. The van's signal led them to a cluster of outbuildings far from the main house. "Remember," Reeves cautioned as they parked, "we just need enough evidence to force an investigation. In and out, quick and quiet." Maeve nodded, her heart pounding. The cameras hidden in the crate would already be recording, but they needed their own documentation too. They crept forward through shadows, guided by Gus's hand-drawn map. The first building yielded exactly what they'd expected. Rows of cages, some still bearing traces of blood. Maeve's camera clicked quietly, capturing every detail. In the second building, they found drums of accelerant and stacks of betting ledgers, just like the charred ones from the fight pit. "This is it," Maeve breathed, photographing page after page. "This connects everything, the fights, the arsons, all of it." They were so focused on documenting the evidence that they almost missed the subtle click of a switch. Suddenly, industrial floodlights blazed to life, bathing the entire area in harsh white light. Maeve's heart stopped as heavy footsteps approached from behind. "Well now," Calvin Drummond's smooth voice carried across the concrete floor. "Isn't this interesting?" They turned slowly. Drummond stood in the doorway, his expensive ranch coat immaculate even at this hour. Two men flanked him, their postures suggesting concealed weapons. "Mrs. Calder," he continued, his tone falsely pleasant, "I believe we met at last year's county fair fundraiser, though I don't recall inviting you for a private tour of my property." Maeve's fingers tightened around her camera. She could feel Reeves tensing beside her, ready to move if needed. But Drummond's next words froze them both. "I have to admit, I'm impressed. You've been quite persistent, just like your husband was. Though I'd hoped you'd be smarter about it than Tom." The casual cruelty in his voice made Maeve's blood boil. But she forced herself to stay calm, knowing their evidence was already transmitting to secure locations. "It's over, Drummond," she said steadily. "Everything in this building is already documented. Multiple authorities have the footage from our planted cameras. You can't bury this anymore." Drummond's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "My dear, you really don't understand how things work around here, do you? Money talks, people forget, evidence disappears." "Not this time," Reeves spoke up, his voice firm. "Too many people know, too many copies exist. The truth is already out there." Drummond studied them for a long moment, his facade of civility cracking slightly. "The truth," he said softly, "is whatever I say it is. Just like the truth about Tom's unfortunate accident. Sometimes people just don't know when to mind their own business." Maeve felt the weight of her camera, heavy with evidence that would finally expose everything this man had done. She thought of Tom, of all the other victims who had never seen justice. Her voice came out strong and clear. "The truth is exactly what's going to bring you down." Drummond's pleasant mask shattered. He barked an order, and his men slammed the building's doors shut. The sharp smell of diesel filled the air as liquid splashed against the wooden walls. "No!" Maeve lunged forward, but Reeves caught her arm. Through the slats, she glimpsed more men dousing the building's exterior. Her heart hammered as she realized they were going to burn them alive, just like Tom. A familiar bark pierced the night. Yarrow bounded through a rear window Drummond's men had missed, glass shattering around him. The dog landed gracefully, taking a protective stance in front of Maeve and Reeves. "That damn dog again," Drummond snarled. He struck a match, its small flame reflecting in his cold eyes. Time to finish what should have been done months ago. The match arced through the air. Fire erupted instantly, racing up the diesel-soaked walls. Thick black smoke began pouring from the burning wood. Deputy Haynes appeared through the haze, pistol raised. "Should have stayed out of it, Maeve," he said, his badge gleaming dully in the growing firelight. "Could have lived a long, quiet life." But before he could fire, Yarrow launched himself at the deputy. The dog's training kicked in, not attacking wildly, but with precise movements that sent the gun clattering across the floor. Haynes screamed, as powerful jaws clamped around his arm. The smoke was getting thicker. Maeve dropped to her knees, trying to find cleaner air. Her eyes stung and watered as she searched desperately for an escape route. The main doors were fully engulfed now, and flames were spreading rapidly across the ceiling. A thunderous crash shook the building as a support beam gave way, showering them with burning splinters. Through the chaos, Maeve heard terrified bellowing. In a pen at the far end, a massive bull was charging against its gate in panic, blocking their last possible exit. "We need to calm him," Reeves shouted over the roar of the fire, already pulling supplies from his ever-present medical bag. He moved toward the frenzied animal, loading a sedative with steady hands despite the inferno around them. Maeve pressed her shirt over her mouth, fighting to draw breath in the suffocating smoke. The heat was becoming unbearable. Another beam cracked ominously overhead. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the whole structure came down. Yarrow kept Haynes pinned, the deputy's struggles growing weaker as smoke inhalation took its toll. The dog's training held firm, every hem. He wouldn't let go without a command, even as flames crept closer. Reeves approached the bull carefully, speaking in low, soothing tones that somehow carried through the chaos. The huge animal's eyes rolled white with fear, but the vet's calm presence began to reach it. The sedative found its mark, and gradually the bull's desperate thrashing slowed. "Maeve," Reeves called. "Help me move him." She stumbled forward, choking on the thick smoke. Together, they pushed against the drowsy bull's bulk. Inch by inch, they cleared enough space to squeeze past toward the gate beyond. A deafening crack split the air. Maeve looked up to see the ceiling beginning to cave in. "Yarrow, come," she commanded. The dog instantly released Haynes and bounded to her side. They burst through the gate into marginally clearer air, but they weren't safe yet. The entire building was now fully engulfed, collapsing behind them as they ran. Maeve's lungs burned. Her legs felt like lead. But she forced herself forward, Yarrow pressing against her side, Reeves right beside her. Behind them, Haynes's scream cut off abruptly as burning timbers crashed down. The heat was like a physical wall at their backs as they finally broke free of the building's deadly embrace. They didn't stop running until they reached the safety of their vehicle. Maeve turned to look back at the inferno, her body shaking with adrenaline and emotion. The barn was completely consumed now, flames reaching high into the night sky. Somewhere in the distance, sirens were wailing. Reeves gripped her shoulder. "We need to move, now." His voice was hoarse from smoke, but urgent. Maeve nodded, her throat too raw to speak. She clutched her camera, praying its memory card had survived. As they piled into the car, Yarrow wedged protectively between them. She saw Drummond's silhouette outlined against the flames. Even from this distance, his rage was palpable. But he had failed. They had survived his attempt to silence them, just as they had survived everything else he had thrown at them. And now they had even more evidence of his crimes. Tell of it, if they could just get away to share it. Reeves gunned the engine, tires throwing gravel as they sped into the darkness. Maeve kept her eyes locked on the rearview mirror until the glow of the fire finally faded from view. Her hands found Yarrow's fur, drawing comfort from his solid presence. They had faced death in that burning barn and emerged alive. But Maeve knew with grim certainty that Drummond wouldn't stop until one side of this fight was finished, once and for all. The night air hit Maeve's smoke-filled lungs like a blessing as they stumbled away from the blazing barn. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, but she couldn't stop moving. Yarrow pressed close against her side, his fur singed but his spirit unbroken. Through tear-blurred eyes, she saw other dogs racing from the inferno. Fighting dogs Drummond had kept imprisoned, now freed in the chaos. Headlights suddenly cut through the darkness, and Maeve's heart seized until she heard a familiar voice shouting, "Over here, this way." It was Rowdy Pennington, waving frantically from his truck. Behind him, a convoy of vehicles with federal markings poured onto the property, lights flashing. Reeves grabbed her arm, steadying her as they made their way towards safety. "The ATF got our signal," he said hoarsely. "Rowdy must have led them here." The sound of an engine roaring to life cut through the chaos. Through the smoke, Maeve saw Drummond's truck lurching into motion, tires spinning in the gravel as he tried to escape. Without thinking, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the emergency flare she'd brought for navigation. Her hands didn't shake as she struck it. The bright red light blazed against the darkness, casting everything in a bloody glow. She stepped directly into the truck's path, holding the flare high. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice raw but powerful. "It's over, Drummond." The truck's brakes squealed as Drummond swerved to avoid her. In that moment of hesitation, Yarrow acted. The dog launched himself through the open window of the truck's cab, powerful jaws closing on Drummond's arm. The rancher screamed as Yarrow dragged him out onto the ground. Federal agents swarmed in, weapons drawn. "ATF, don't move!" Their flashlight beams illuminated Drummond's face, twisted with rage and disbelief as they handcuffed him. Rowdy reached them, his eyes wide at the scene. "When you didn't check in, I called in the cavalry," he explained, putting a supportive arm around Maeve's shoulders. "You okay?" She nodded, unable to speak as the adrenaline began to fade. Reeves took her hand, his grip warm and steady. Together, they watched as agents led Drummond away. The rancher spat curses as he passed them. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "All of you." Maeve stood straighter, meeting his gaze without flinching. "No," she said quietly. "The only regret here is yours. For thinking you could break people's spirits as easily as you broke the law." More vehicles arrived. Police cars, fire trucks, animal control vans. The night became organized chaos as firefighters battled the blaze and officers gathered evidence. Maeve gave her statement in a daze, her voice mechanical as she recounted everything. The dog fights, the arsons, the proof connecting Drummond to her husband's murder. Through it all, Yarrow stayed by her side, his presence a constant comfort. When a stern-faced federal agent approached about taking him into protective custody, Maeve's arms tightened around the dog's neck. "Please," she whispered. "He's been through enough. He needs a home, not another cage." The agent's expression softened as she watched Yarrow press closer to Maeve. "Given the circumstances, I think we can work something out," she said. "He's clearly bonded with you, and you've both helped break this case wide open. I'll make sure the paperwork goes through to grant you permanent custody." Relief flooded through Maeve. She buried her face in Yarrow's fur, feeling tears start again. But these were healing tears, washing away the last of her grief and fear. Dawn was breaking by the time things settled down. The fire was out, leaving only smoking ruins behind. Drummond and his conspirators were in custody, and animal rescue teams were caring for the freed dogs. Maeve sat on the tailgate of Rowdy's truck, a blanket around her shoulders and a cup of coffee warming her hands. Reeves joined her, his face streaked with soot but his eyes bright. "The ATF agent says they'll need us to testify," he said, settling beside her. "But with the evidence we gathered and Drummond's attempt to kill us, she's confident he'll be going away for a long time." Maeve nodded, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "It doesn't bring Tom back," she said softly. "But at least now I know the truth. And maybe we've stopped anyone else from getting hurt." "You did more than that," Reeves said. "You stood up to a man everyone else was afraid to challenge. You fought for justice when it would have been easier to look away." He paused, then added quietly, "You're a remarkable woman," Maeve called her. She turned to look at him, seeing the warmth in his eyes. The connection between them had grown stronger through every challenge, built on shared courage and understanding. Now, with the danger past, she could finally acknowledge the feelings that had been growing in her heart. "What happens now?" she asked. Reeves smiled, taking her hand. "Now? Now we heal, we rebuild, we make something good out of all this darkness." He glanced down at Yarrow, who sat alertly at their feet. Together. Maeve felt something unfurl in her chest, hope, bright and new as the dawn spreading across the sky. She squeezed Reeves' hand, watching the sunrise paint the world in fresh colors. After so much loss and pain, she had found her way to truth, to justice, and maybe even to love. Yarrow pressed his head against her knee, and she scratched behind his ears, marveling at how this wounded dog had led her to her own healing. They had saved each other, in the end. And now, with Reeves beside her and the worst behind them, she could finally look forward to building a new life, one founded on the courage, loyalty, and trust they had forged in fire. The morning light grew stronger, chasing away the last shadows of night. Maeve took a deep breath of clean air, feeling stronger with each moment. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it, not alone, but with the family she had found through adversity. A loyal dog, a good man, and her own rediscovered strength. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.